Greetings, friends. It's your brother Dennis. This is part two of, I'm going to just call them mini series, for lack of a better term. Suggest a better one in the comments. Part two of Mark Smith, the John Tetzel of Circleville. Listen, it's a hilarious parallel when you think about the idea that things that were whispered, whatever credence you want to put towards that, except that as things unfolded, some of those things seemed to be true, that Mark Smith was tapped in by the board of directors of the college to try to expand it, to grow it, to bring some kind of financial whatever. He was brought as a businessman. I don't think that his spirituality was a focus. That seems evident in his total lack of respect for the heritage of the place that he came into. In part one, I referred to them as goons, not speaking to their actual character, but more the presence that they brought, as everybody had to be in uniform. That corporate spirit I described, appearance over integrity. Everything has to look right. It doesn't matter if it actually is, but everything has to look right, and everything has to look good on paper. But it can be a rotting carcass otherwise. And I believe that's why his leadership style fit well with the churches of Christ Christian Union and their outward holiness, secondary perfection that they teach and focus on there. It was a perfect marriage, probably, as things turned out. So it felt like a corporate takeover, and many of my fellow students became upset at the changes that were taking place. There was an essay portion I mentioned in part one, in order for you to get into the college, and you were scrutinized. And that removing that from the application to the college basically removed that scrutiny and emphasized they would just let anybody in. And being security on campus, some of my friends I could tag. I've been saying there are people who might not be as outspoken as your brother Dennis, whom I could Facebook message right now. I could pause this video and shake hands with these people, all who can corroborate everything that I'm saying. I have no reason to lie in what I'm saying in these stories. It changed. The environment changed. It felt like a corporate takeover, and ugliness began to percolate. Many of my fellow students came to me, and the then student body president, outgoing student body president, Jessica Peabody at the time, she's probably married and changed her name now, tapped me in. Hey, you should do this. I shared that story, how I put my name in. It's interesting to note that Dean Olson told me that first, the speech, one of the finest speeches I think that's ever come out of me, the elephant in the room, I called it. And then the other ones, they went first, in which I was like, yeah, okay, doesn't matter where you put me in this docket. I got my words ready. I got a standing ovation for that speech. And then in the lunchroom, when they announced who had won the election, I had a standing ovation in the lunchroom as well, students and professors at the time. Dean Olson told me it had been 17 years he'd been doing this, officiating these elections. And he said, Dennis, I've never seen a winner get the applause and the ovation and the overwhelming victory that you got here. And I'm sure he was like, oh God, what's going to happen? If you catch Dean Olson still today, I believe he'd tell you that story time with Dennis is still one of his favorite activities. Another isolated incident. So I won overwhelmingly. And one of the things about the student body president was that you're supposed to meet with the president of the college once a month. So I thought, good, this positions me in a place where maybe I can bridge the gap here and help him understand what he's done and how it looks. And I may have hamstrung myself campaigning as the dark horse. I can acknowledge that now. I try to look at what was my part in this. And anytime you're looking at anything and pulling apart things that have hurt you, it's probably a good exercise to take a deep breath and pull your thorns out first. What I did possibly to cause this? I may have been seen, and I definitely was probably seen as antagonistic, campaigning as the dark horse. And in my speech, I'll tell you, I've learned over time growing up in a combative household. Another thing that I've learned is to choose my words very carefully. You'll never get a public apology from Dennis Craig McFarland because I'm very careful with every word that I say. And so you're not going to hear me say anything I don't mean. Say what you mean what you say, stand behind it. So we went through the summer, and our first meeting I had with me, I've actually tagged in my sister of Christ at the time. Her name now, married name now, is Naomi Squires. I messaged her, hey, I'm going to use your name in this if that's okay. My sister. Also, strongly opposed to the crapping on the heritage and the disrespect for the environment that this man created. That's her own story to tell if she decides she wants to tag in. We had that in common, and I knew better than to walk into this first meeting with this shark man without someone with me. We walked into the meeting, her and I together, and this was the beginning of the following, my first meeting with him, beginning of the next year. He had Dean Olson sitting in the office with him with a copy of the manual or the handbook or whatever. And I went there and I sat down. He'd say hi, or greet me or anything. He looked at me and he goes, Dennis, I don't want you to think that you're going to come in here and tell me what I'm going to do. That's how he started that meeting. Okay, so that tells me a lot about the man and what he thinks about he's already saw this as an adversarial, either as an adversarial relationship, or he came with a mind to do some unscrupulous things and knew that I was a person that's going to have an eye on him and was trying to dominate, show his dominance. I think it's the latter of those two things, as the way that things played out with him. There's more to say. At any rate, I did look at him in that meeting and said, well, I don't want you to think you're going to sit here and tell me what I'm going to do either. And explained to him, I felt like I took the stance of being the bigger man, explained to him the stake I had in all this. I still got some education here. You have created a crappy environment here. I came with a spirit to try to help. I can help, or your time here can begin miserably. I don't think I really have anything more to say at this moment. Looked at Naomi. I believe that's how it went. I'm not exactly sure. Memory's weird when you get old. But I felt in my spirit something like that is the way that ended. Whatever, dude. Okay. He did. After that, there was a move-in week, and they have a thing where they call the parents as a kind of a big goodbye to their, you've dropped your kids off, hang out here for a little bit, and asked me to speak at that, which I felt like, okay, cool, man. That was an olive branch. And that speech, the second one, was probably the second finest speech that's ever left my mouth. Having been a parent myself and also an adult going through college, and the strenuousness that came with that gave me a different perspective to soothe those parents in the crowd. Hey, man, your kids, you can trust them here. I spoke highly of several of the professors there and their care and concern and their door always being open. And I got a nod from him afterwards, like, but he never met me again. And we just kind of gravitated at opposite ends from each other and nodded in each other's direction when we were around. And in my mind, things were okay. That was an interesting time. There was still a percolating negativity that never did go away. I did relinquish my title with campus security. I think what it came down to, we were doing trial sermons. I began doing trial sermons around the end of my time there, 2009. So, and this young kid that took over, man, he had a white, I think it was a Chevy Cavalier, a white one, and invested in like bubble light to put on the top of his car and road cones, and like when they'd have events at the college and your boy would like set up cones and flashlights. Dude, what are you doing? But I wasn't on security at the time, so man, I almost sometimes wanted to get a lawn chair and just sit and laugh. Buford T. Justice. Well, I did my best to try to leave the campus better than it was when I got there. And it wasn't bad when I got there. It actually reversed, turned itself upside down while I was there. Many conversations, many people. My trailer in the student housing at the back, many people will tell you that live there and understood at the time can tap in on this, was an open counseling office. The Queen met several people too, came back there and sat at our table or sat in our living room and talked. And we did our best to try to help people heal before we left. As a result of that, we, in looking for a church, it was close and practical for us as things were, decided to pop in on campus church one morning. Pastor Don Seymour was the pastor there at the time. We visited one Sunday morning. We popped in. It wasn't a holiday or anything, and just a random pop in. There's a couple of students there. Dr. Latimer and his wife Merla were there, I believe, the first time we popped in. It was a good service. I mean, I could sit and listen to Don Seymour speak all day. So we ducked out. We had during the closing prayer. We're like, I don't know. Queen and I have just learned. Poor us, man. We've just learned to be so weird when it comes to church. We're trying to duck out. It's closing prayer. Cool. Let's duck out the side and out the door. Before we get Don Seymour, Melinda will tell you the same thing. Literally ran out to our car to catch us before we could get out of the parking lot. And I'll tell you, if Mark Smith looking at me and saying to me, I don't want you to think you're going to come here and tell me what you're going to do. Don Seymour running out to our car to catch us before we left to greet us for being at church spoke volumes to me about Don Seymour. I'm telling you, there should be a statue erected in Don Seymour's name somewhere. We started attending, and wound up. It was at his encouragement. I actually had gotten my local license through Lighthouse Ministries under Pastor Herschel's advice, and had that. Rather than renew it, Don Seymour encouraged me to step up and take the next step up, which is the council license, which is 2 years for that under ordination. And of course, everybody at the campus church at the time endorsed that, because it's more than one person, people have to sign off on you to do that. So I found enough favor. And although it wasn't a paid position, I came in under Don Seymour as the assistant pastor at campus church. And it's crazy, that church, it was on the campus. And the main problem that we had towards trying to grow that church was people in the community didn't know that it was a community church. I think many people in Circleville either didn't care or didn't realize that was you could have normal services there. It would have been awesome too, because I had a mind with Don Seymour to create opportunities for student preachers to cut their teeth there. I had the good fortune of having my Uncle Ray was a United Methodist pastor in Bloomingburg for a very long time, Bloomingburg United Methodist Church here in Ohio. And when he found out that I had the call to ministry, he had me go to preach at his church, cover for him on vacations and stuff like that. So I had the good fortune of those poor people in my early sermons, man. Those are stories for another time. But these kids needed that opportunity. And there was a small pastoral group of people that you could tap into for that too, that you could schedule. And Pastor Don and I began talking about that. And so I came in as assistant pastor under Don Seymour. I think that's a good place for me to cut off part 2. I have to literally make these. I have just enough memory left on my laptop. I have to make these, post them on YouTube, and then delete them so I can make another one. I'll look at some external storage, or I got a couple of jump drives in a drawer somewhere. I'll see if I can work something out. But these are one take, grab it and go. Part 3 is going to focus on the theft of campus church. Campus church was stolen. Mark Smith swept in with his team of goons and once again ruined the day. But that's a large enough portion of the story. I need to do another part. So I would encourage you to stick with the story. Visit www.ttwmtruth.com. There's some things, it's my art. There's a little bit of a blog there to kind of catch you up on who I am. So I've been saying it's a small rabbit hole. You can squirrely around in there a little bit and jump right back out. If nobody said they love you, I love you. Hopefully you have a good day today. If not, try again tomorrow.